Our first speaker today is Dr. Byron Reeves. He's going to be talking about the behavioral psychology underpinning gamification in the workplace. And although, of course, technology is important, it's really a facilitator. We have to understand also the human drivers that determine the success of gamified applications. So please help me welcome Dr. Reeves. Thank you.
Can I get my first slide here? There we go. This is gets us started with a wonderful contrast to the last talk. This is the venue for many people who think they're playing a game. These are the software products, very powerful, extremely well connected, marvels of this age, but stunningly dull often. Related to work that's really hard to know how you're doing. Very difficult to do it as a team. It's very hard to be engaged and find any kind of psychological attachment to these products. That's what I'm going to talk about. So the thesis that we all have is that here's a place that we need some help. Work sucks often. Games are great. There are lots of mechanics. There are lots of features, ingredients. If we could just write the list and learn how to execute them, we could make things that are really cool. We could bring the sensibilities of all that gaming to all those dull-looking applications that you saw on the first slide. And if you work in sales, you could play Closer Wars. If you work other places, you could do lots of things that use the engagement and power of games to bring people to work and productivity in a way that's not otherwise possible. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to do this pretty much as an update. And I know that one of the things that has been true about this conference as I've gone to it is the serious look at games for consumers, games that are consumer-facing, versus games that you might actually be paid to play that are part of your work in a company. And the more I listen to presentations about these two different tracks, I'm not sure it's time yet, but I think there will be a time when the psychology around these two different venues for thinking about game sensibilities will need to diverge a bit to think about actually how to get these applications done, how to make them successful. So this is a bit of an update from past gamification summits, and I've got a couple issues I'm going to talk about here. The thesis about how to take those boring venues for work, apply game mechanics to them, and a lot of the psychology around that. That thesis is out. Other people have talked about this with my co-author and co-founder of Seriosity, a place where we're trying to bring this to life, Leighton Reed. We've written this book called Total Engagement, now a couple years old, but that tries to provide intellectual air cover for any of you that are trying to do this in a company, especially if you're up against allergies to thinking about entertainment sensibilities in the context of work. So here's some things I'm going to talk about. Who's playing? What are the most important game features if we're thinking about people at work? Connections to behavioral data. We're in the behavior change business, most of us. Some of us are even saying that now as a major theme. How do we do that? What's the evidence for success that we should be holding out as something we'd really like to live or die by? And thinking about introducing games, this whole notion of change management. How do you drop off a new application to a company and get a couple 100,000 people to get excited about a new application, and what are the sensibilities associated with that? So first thing I'm going to talk about is consumers versus employees, and continue some comments I've made here. The last talk, these are some slides from one of my favorite consumer-facing solutions. They have other solutions, I know, but these are bunchball pages from places on the web where game mechanics are being applied to get people who are outside of our company, bring them in, reinforce them, recognize them, create achievements, leaderboards. That's an interesting sensibility that I think, and that's an interesting context in which to do this, But when you think about actually creating a venue for work, so I now go to work as a call center agent in my game. I now go to work as a security guard for the London Underground in my game. I sit at a console and I play a game. It's the place where I work. It's the breadth of the narrative that has to be associated with that experience, the kind of sensibilities about introducing it, how do you teach someone to do that, all the corporate concerns about who gets to see what data and transparency and whatnot. This really is substantially different. And I think it will, at some point, behoove us to actually recognize that as we think about actually using these games for places to work. So some comments there. I mean, in this consumer world, we're interested in getting as many people to our games as we can. We want to leverage social networks. We want to make certain that if I do something, all my friends know about it. We want to think about viral loops. How long does it take me to generate 2 more players in the game, and all the advantages associated with those numbers? We might be willing to accept a shorter attention span in that game. Lots of different sensibilities in the consumer space that may really change substantially when we move to a game as a place where I go to work. First of all, I might be getting paid to play that game. It's not something I actually need to be attracted to or enticed, but it may be part of my job. But I do have a sensitivity to stuff being pushed at me, whether it's a new healthcare plan or some other corporate policy. These are things that I might be unwilling to accept, or not willing to accept it in a speed and format in which the company would like. I've got lots of concerns about this game. Let's see, now I know about games. I'm from the gamer generation. I play a lot of them at home, but this is going to affect my pay. Where I am on the leaderboard is related to my weekly or annual performance review. And wait a minute, now you're going to show where I stand on the leaderboard relative to everybody else who's on my same sales team. Well, maybe that's okay for the sales team because they're used to that kind of a leaderboard. But now let's see, you're going to take the point of purchase system that we have that shows how well I'm doing selling at my counter in my store among thousands nationally, and show everybody where I am on that leaderboard. So there are lots of perils of transparency. Some people might say, and we know this happens, I don't want to play that game. I don't want to be exposed that much. Others might say, gee, I'm on the bottom of the leaderboard. How can I get to the top? Who do I need to talk to be instructed on how to do that? So this notion of consumers versus employees is a very important update, I think, and that bifurcation in thinking about the psychology around these games is increasing. So that's one important point I'd like to make. I'd also like to talk about game ingredients. This book that I mentioned, Total Engagement, a lot of the ingredients that we find in successful games that companies might use are chapter titles, but there's a lot of different ways that we can be involved in gaming. And for consumers, it may be a little bit different list or an emphasis on different things in the list than for employees. A game I love, or a game of sorts, next time you go into Target, look around the counter at what the clerk is looking at, and I'm not sure it's a great game yet, or certainly the interface, but you are getting a G or an R for red or green, depending on how quickly or how closely the amount of time in milliseconds that you use to check a particular product was done relative to how it's done throughout the actual throughout all the stores. So it's a points game. This person was 88% green. Very, very rudimentary, but interesting. It's a metric that happens quickly. There's lots of good feedback. That's a nice use of points. We can make a leaderboard about how the sales guys are doing and provide some transparency about success there. So these are, the badges, the leaderboards, the points. These are all things that we should discuss. I know there are some allergies to these, or sometimes there's a pejorative to gamification with respect to the simplicity of those features, but they're great features. There are also some features in the game list that deserve more attention in the corporate context. And I just want to highlight one. So this is the list of things that we talk about when we try to deal with the research and look at what's successful in these games. Self-representation, avatars, ranks and levels, pretty much covered by the points and leaderboards. Feedback and multiple time domains, this is really big, and big in all kinds of games. And you can go down the list. But let me talk a little bit about narrative. This is my annual one-year update relative to last year's talk about something that I really think has a lot of potential in corporate use of games. So if first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're learning in the lab about this. So when I think about engagement, I think about psychophysiological arousal and things that we do experimentally in the lab. So you come into the lab, we put a couple electrodes, we do all kinds of things. We might look at your brain while you're playing a game, but we put a couple electrodes on your fingers. We're measuring the amount of moisture that develops in your fingers, skin conductance level by passing a volt of electricity between the two electrodes. This is a great measure, 100 years of experience working about this as the operationalization of excitement and motivation. I mean, motivation has got motive as motion. It's the potential to get ready to do something. So that's a really important criterion. So now we use this measure when we look at different aspects of games. And here's a really simple result that's useful in thinking about applying games in the corporate context. This is from with Annie Lang's lab at Indiana University. Two sides of the room here. This side of the room is going to come in and play a game, first-person shooter game. We're going to kill people. We're going to shoot people. They're going to blow up. And we know that's arousing. The skin conductance levels will increase when you shoot somebody. But all you do is see the people and shoot them. This half of the room comes in, gets the electrodes hooked up, and a quick 3-sentence story is given about exactly who these bad guys are. We've been at war with them for the last 25 years. I wonder who will win. Last week this happened. You create a narrative about the game, and then you look at the amount of arousal associated with the different actions of stalking and killing. And it's a lot juicier when you're involved in a narrative or a story. So we know this happens in entertainment. Several other experiments show that. And what we're interested in is finding the same way to do this with companies. So if this game is a venue, and we know that's a successful aspect of games and all kinds of entertainment, why not actually create the venue for work that shares the company's story and involves and gets people active in that story? So here's an example of an application that we're working on for a healthcare organization, where this is a difficult conversation now. It's not somebody, you don't walk into a company and say, what's your epic story? And they tell you and say, okay, we're going to use that in the game. Oftentimes you're responsible for actually moderating that discussion. But we used to be a company, this company over here on this side of the river. We had these kinds of corporate goals. We lived in this kind of a regulatory context. We have got to get to the other side of the river because healthcare regulation is changing. Lots of things are going to be different, and that story has got nuance, and it's really a wonderful story. And you work in the call center that is going to talk to people one at a time and help us as a company get to the other side of the river. So you've got lots of different metrics that you can see about how those calls are going, but you also get to see, and I'm abbreviating a pretty big story here about this particular application, you also get to see your contribution, as small as it might be in your little carol in a 3,000-person call center. You get to see your girder drop into place in a 1-year-long progress bar that uses the wonders of computing to highlight your contribution to the story. And it's the same story that everybody's got from the top floor to the bottom floor. So it's an exemplet. So this notion of a narrative is really powerful. And the interviews that we're doing with people that are working with these applications that have a powerful company narrative that is plausible, credible, that people can actually participate in. So some comments about this epic business story. People want to be part of a big story. This is one of the prime reasons why people leave jobs if they have the financial flexibility to do so. I just didn't know if I was making a difference. I didn't know how my small activity related to the larger good. So people want to celebrate these very small, but they're critical contributions. People really like that. This, as I mentioned, causes a lot of difficult conversations. To build the game, you've actually got to know what that story is. Hard to get that. But these are stories that can maintain interest over a long period. They can get people to think about progress in a time frame that matters in a corporate context, which may be a little bit different than an entertainment context. Okay, connecting to behavioral data. So a lot of us now talk about being in the behavior change business. And one of the things I want to encourage that we've had some success with, and I want to encourage you to think about, is really digging into the most interesting metrics, the most interesting behaviors that people can perform that are related to company goals. So this is kind of beyond knowledge, attitudes, intentions, small little behaviors, but really digging as deeply as we can into the really great behaviors. Now this is obviously top-down, very hard to do, much more expensive. How do we get that data? But we're starting to experiment with this. So here's the most difficult. How do we get access to interesting behavior data that I can show you? We developed a game about energy use, and it was related to energy efficiency. But we didn't want to have a game that was related only to, did you learn something? Do you promise to do something in the future? We wanted to relate the game to actual energy use. So what we did was this, and I won't show you the large computing framework for this, but what we did was create a stream where turn off the lights in your house. The smart meter that's been installed by the local utility registers that, sends it in some time metric, 15 minutes, 1 hour, no reason it couldn't be every second, sends that information to the utility allows access to the server reports to the game server, and the carbon monster dies a little bit, or you get 10 points, or whatever the game designer thinks is interesting. What's interesting, though, is that it's actual behavior using your house and things you do in your house as a joystick for the game. So that threshold between me and the screen is now much less. Things I do in my home really matter. So we built this game where people are it's a very multifaceted game, but I'll just give you a brief summary. People are chasing around in kind of diner dash fashion, a family around a house, and they are doing well or not in this chase game based on what's happening in the real world. So you're advantaged or disadvantaged in the game world based on what happens in the real world. And it was a nice experiment for us to get access to really big behavioral data. And this is actually something that's going on right now, the first time I've showed this to anybody. But each of these points here represent 10 days of energy use in a home, and the first 3 represent 30 days prior to the time you started playing the game, which are the middle 3 measurements, and then after you started playing the game. So we're getting single digit, but in the realm of energy efficiency, highly significant, policy-wise, financially, climate, save the world metrics, but still single-digit behavior changes, where we're able to actually point to a connection between gameplay and behavior as it naturally exists in the real world. So pretty kind of like that connection. So these are very complicated to do this, but don't always use that as an excuse not to start there. But it's very complicated to do this. Get into behaviors. Sensors are everywhere now, including organizations where name badges tell you who you were in physical proximity to throughout the day. I mean, it's just a wealth of big data available that can be used in the games. But also expect and this is unlike the consumer context, expect to spend most of the time in developing that game, figuring out who needs to approve getting access to that data. Far more complicated than the 10 guys that coded up the software to get this done, is to talk to all the regulatory agencies, PG&E, lawyers, about who gets to see that data and why and who owns it. And that's going to be true in almost every significant corporate application, I believe. Also, this is automated entry of data into the game. It's not player entry of data. Very critical in terms of getting people to actually participate. Okay, a couple of other these issues. Evidence of enterprise success. So one of the things that we always hear, and this can't be wrong, but I'm going to nudge it a bit. Start small, iterate quickly, to break down the process into small units, show success, get a few more people involved, get your team a little bit bigger, make a little bit bigger game. And I think I have a lot of impatience for that, actually, with respect to the possibilities of getting metrics that people really care about in a game. So here's another very quick story, a game that Seriosity built for a large retailer. You're in your store, you're doing lots of fun stuff in the game. I'm not going to say too much about that. But you're also, while you're playing the game, working in the call center, taking the most difficult calls that the store has to offer. The rest are shipped overseas, but this is an American group that are really people that are working extremely hard, very talented socially. And behind the scenes, the Wizard of Oz, our software, is figuring out how to change that game in real time to make metrics wiggle that people really care about. When you go in and you say, I want to build the most important game in this company, or I want to attack the most important metrics, what is it that would cause you all to high five in the hallway on Friday afternoon? Just really ask that question. And when you talk long enough, and this is a lot of service on top of the software, but when you talk long enough, you know what we really need? We really need a way to tell the people that are working in this call center when they need to spend time on customer satisfaction, talk more, and when they need to go fast because we're really backlogged. So in that game, you can do that. And this is more data, but it's we're developing a literature now that it's not public data yet, but it's brand new, where we've got a blue line and a red line that are people that are working with a version of the game that was quickly, kind of in Zynga fashion, quickly changed to reinforce customer satisfaction versus go fast. And if you're in the blue group, you were reinforced to go fast, and you took on average across a bunch of sessions about 30 seconds left on a 4-minute phone call. And then you get the guys at Accenture or whoever to start, let's see, that percentage reduction on a call center that costs us $27 million per quarter, it gets to be pretty nice. And you get to wiggle a metric that's really huge. Okay, so that's another one. Evidence of success, the last thing this is related to that last story. Go for the big metrics, the high fives. Not just, can we just see if this idea works? Realize that access to these data are going to be difficult, and a lot of the conversation about the games is going to be about that. Okay, so last point. Why should I play a game at work? This is related to issues that I'm currently experiencing when we take these games, wonderfully executed and designed, out into the real world. How do you get people to play them? Because when we think about, the way we get people to play this game is to say, your job, you're getting paid to work in this place. Do it. But another retail game that we had, which is trying to use all these engagement features, just wonderfully executed in my view, brought into another retail context where, well, let's see, you can kind of play the game if you'd like to be, if you're interested in seeing what it's about, but there's some ambiguity on whether you have to play it or whatnot. This whole notion of change management really needs a serious look here. So these are the lessons or some thoughts about that in my update. The stricter rules actually seem to work the best. We used to work this way. Now we're going to work this way. Come and play, or please come and play, but by the way, it's a requirement. Because you get adoption and you get a number of people playing at the same time in a way that really makes it quite a good experience. But that is totally the opposite of how most of these entertainment games work, which are bottom up, where you get one person to tell two other people to have a good experience. So there's an issue there, and I think I would advise that anyone making a game as a venue for work really needs to think about this change management. We're experimenting with people that can act as game gurus, that can help with adoption, who are leaders, who have some credibility, and internal marketing campaigns actually during that launch. So my summary, this is working. You're at the right conference to talk about issues that are working and making a difference. The best and biggest applications are ahead of us. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Reeves. I wish I had had you as a professor in school, and my SAT scores weren't good enough to go to Stanford. But
mine weren't either. I was rejected.
I went to BU. So we'll have time for one quick question. Gentlemen.
Thank you very much for a good presentation. I very like it, and I think this is the same way. My question is, when we try to make our employees like customers, and every of which has his own behavior, his intrinsic motivation, and we say, okay, you have your behavior, but we need to get success, and you will get rewards for this. You need to change it. To
change
make
the
a
type of motivation?
Yeah, no. You need to have a challenge to change your actions. For example, how to combine in the right way intrinsic motivation and what we want to do for people. How to combine that the game was satisfied by player.
Well, so this notion of motivation, how do you get them to do that? I'm not sure I got all of your question, but let me try. So the competition for the game you build for your employees is whatever other commercial corporate application they're using, or whatever other work process they're using. The competition is not Facebook, what's great on TV, or what did Zynga just make last week. That's where we're borrowing all these sensibilities. So I'm going to pay you $25 an hour to play this game. Would you rather play this game, or would you rather work over here in this enterprise application that you've been working in and, by the way, falling asleep at? So that's kind of the competition. So that's one comment about that. It really just needs to be better than that. The other thing about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, and we write a lot about that, and that's something that I think a lot about. I don't think you can say intrinsic and extrinsic explain corporate versus or consumer versus employee games. Both of those categories of motivation are present in a major way in almost all the games you play. I mean, I want to earn the bananas you're going to give me for doing well, and that's extrinsic. But by the way, I really want to earn them because I want to show them to my friend over here that I've achieved something, and that's intrinsic. So it goes back and forth. And if there's something else I didn't hear in your question, I'd be happy to chat. Yeah, chat more about that.
Thanks again. Okay, thank you.